Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of the Free American Hour. I'm your host, Clay Douglas. My guest today was supposed to be Jack McLamb, and he decided to cancel. I would suspect this was pressure put on him by RBN, which he broadcast on. And he was told, now Carol Asher was supposed to be on the show too. She called me a little bit earlier. To offer to be on the show, because Jack McLamb's got a new book out. Let's see if we can get a hold of her. And although I was getting an error on that too, still getting a phone network error on calling Jack McLamb. So again, that's blocked. That avenue is blocked. But you know what? I was kind of expecting that. And you may not know that Jack McLamb and I have a long history. We've worked, I've promoted his books. I've had him on my radio show many times. And one of the last times that I met Jack was at Roby Ridge, Illinois. Roby, Illinois, where Shirley Allen was besieged by police. And we went there to talk to the militia. Jack said that the militia was the police were in the right for what they did. Jack was booed off the stage at Roby, Illinois. The snipers were on the roof. The police were around the place. I took the stand and talked to the police, basically. I said, you're doing the wrong thing by attacking Shirley Allen. You should be helping her. You know, we had some kid out there that was walking up and taking her water. You know, they tried to stop him. And Jack McLamb has actually done a pretty good job of trying to inform the police forces and the military, police and military, against the New World Order. Now, they put out a manual, and if you want to get that manual, you can call 208-935-7852. I don't know quite, well, I know, but let's give them the benefit of the doubt. Jack's had a stroke. Jack is not feeling well, but they put out the announcement, and this is available on my website, the Operation Vampire Killer 2012. Stop it, boys. It's a good deal of new information has been included, totaling 218 pages. The main impetus, in fact, urging McLamb to publish a sequel stemmed from the need to document so very much that has happened politically and governmentally to the further detriment of our nation. And since publication of the Vampire Killer 2000, and especially since that tragic pivotal event we call 9/11, all of it seeming to be quite literal. Hello, is this Carol?
Yes, I'm just checking to see if there was a problem there.
Yes, ma'am, there was. It wouldn't let me through to you. However, now that you called, we are on the air, we are recording, and I was just telling about the edition of the new edition of Vampire Killer, from Vampire Killer 2000. I was just saying that this was especially Okay, hold on just a moment here. No, I'm going to decline that. All right. Now you've got Vampire Killer 2008 available now, and you've concluded there's been a lot of stuff happened since 9/11, you know, including them trying to take me out for putting building number 7 on the cover of my magazine back in the 2004. The Operation Vampire Killer 2012 provides an overall, even if introductory level, education perfect for police officers, sheriffs, military personnel, government, businesses, church, school officials, and in fact, for Americans everywhere, all of whom need to know and understand what our constitutional republic was created to be, and unfortunately what it has become today. Let's talk about that, Carol. Now you're Jack's assistant. First of all, I mean, it's been almost 8 years since I saw Jack in Illinois, and I know he's had a stroke, and so I understand him not being able to be on today, but you're his assistant, and you're helping with this book, and you're taking orders. One copy's $15. You can get 2 for $28, 3 for $39, all postage paid here. And we've got the address up on my website right now.
Very good. Clay, I just wanted to ask, how much or how well acquainted are your listeners with retired police officer Jack McLamb? How much do they know about him or his police, his peace officer history?
Well, I don't know. I mean, Jack and I go way back to when I was a biker in Phoenix and he was a cop, so yeah. I'm well aware of him, and I think most of my listeners know who Jack McLamb is.
All right, yes, very good. Well, if I could just kind of put myself in the picture here, I became, you might say, aware of our freedom fight in 1979, and that is thanks to a friend giving me some copies of the Spotlight newspaper. Now that today is the American Free Press. It's
yes.
Weekly out of Washington. Well, anyway, when I read just a few copies of that, he gave me 3 different issues. It was sort of like my first awakening to the fact that we have an obligation or a duty and an opportunity as citizens to monitor our government. And so I began to get educated myself, and that's how I met Jack McLamb through patriot publications such as the American Free Press. Is it still okay? Are we on?
Yes, ma'am. We're fine.
Okay, very good.
I don't have to answer that particular phone. So.
Okay. Jack McLamb was running for sheriff of Maricopa County, and I was living in Southern California, and he and his entourage came over to speak, and that's how I met Jack, and I was very impressed to think that there was a police officer who was actually helping the Patriots put out the Patriot message. So I began to get copies of his Aid and Abet police newsletter, where he was educating his fellow officers on constitutional principles and their oath to uphold God-given liberties. And so I continued to do that for a few years, and then we went across country in 2000. Let's see, that was 1987. A whole lot of patriots went from capital to capital, all state capital to state capital, all the way across to Washington, D.C., celebrating the bicentennial of the Constitution. And so I took that trip with some of my friends, and Jack spoke again. That was my second meeting with Jack. He spoke at Valley Forge. And so anyway, then I continued, and 2 years later, I contacted Jack and said I could see that maybe he could use an editor for his newsletter because he wasn't an English major, and that was maybe my one strong point. So anyway, I moved from Southern California over to Phoenix to work hands-on at Jack's Aid and Abet police newsletter office. So then it was, 1992, a couple of years later, Jack was simply putting together another issue of Aid and Abet, his newsletter. And he gave it to us, we were a few of us volunteers there, he gave it to us to edit, to read through, and then he took it back. And he said, wait a minute, there's a whole lot more to say. And so, Clay, what happened was this newsletter became Operation Vampire Killer 2000. And it was a 75-page manual explaining to police officers all the plans to establish a one-world government, and how they, the peace officers, supposed peace officers, were going to be turned into military-type enforcers, and they would be made to enforce this global totalitarian system. And he was telling his officers, no, remember your oath, which was sworn to uphold God-given liberties. You are not to be used to enforce totalitarianism. So that's how Operation Vampire Killer came to be. And of course, Operation Vampire Killer meant that we must kill off this vampire, which is sucking the very lifeblood out of our nation, out of our republic, and out of our God-given liberties. So that's where that began. And that was, I say, 1992. Since then, years went by, and we continued to work there in Phoenix, Arizona, and then until 1998, in connection with Bo Gripe, and Jack McLamb bought property up here in north central Idaho. So we came all the way from Phoenix, the whole group did, up to north central Idaho, and that's where we are today, 13 years later.
Now let me ask you about that, because a few years back, after Jack had done this, I suggested the concept of Liberty Villages. Because I figured if you could generate your own power and grow your own food on a ranch or a farm or out in the woods, for God's sakes, that you really didn't need the government or the banks for much. But
that's right.
Bo Greitz, he started Almost Heaven, and I spoke with people and kind of got in one of these arguments with Bo. But people referred to that as, instead of Almost Heaven, they called it Almost Hell. With anyone that the few people that I had talked to up there. Tell me about Jack's Lamb. Now, what do you call that, and how's it going for you? How are you working this? Are you? I'm down in Texas now, and we're building small houses, tiny Texas houses, and we've got land to put those on, and of course we're selling them all over the country because people are starting to understand you don't really need a 2,000 square foot home in the middle of a city block to survive with, I guess. Tell me about your land.
Well, Bo Gripe came up here, I would think around 1994, 95, and as I say, bought a large tract of land here, and they subdivided it, and it was called Almost Heaven 1, and then they had Almost Heaven 2, and then there were about, a total of, I think, 11 different little communities with all the
recorded live.
All right, sorry about that. I'm talking to Carol Asher.
Yeah.
She's with Jack McLamb, and the name of the new book is Vampire Killers 2000 and what is it, 2013? 2012?
No, it's 2012. Operation Vampire Killer 2012. That's right, 2012 we call it, Operation Vampire Killer 2012. And the subtitle, Clay, since you brought it up, is American Police and Military Action Plan for Stopping Totalitarian World Government Rule. So it's almost like an elementary basic textbook for everything that a police officer, a soldier, any American who wants to live free could afford to learn and know and have at your fingertips. If you want to be able to stand on your rights and stave off any intrusion against those rights. So, but if I could just get back for a second here to Bo Gripe, then had some personal changes in his life, and he left here, and he's been, ever since the late 90s, he's been back in the desert of Nevada, where he and his wife used to live. His wife still has a home here. She's remarried, and she has a home here near us, up here. And Jack McLamb continued publishing Aid and Abet Police and Military newsletter. That was about 1990, about the time the Vampire Killer originally came out in 1992, that Jack expanded his work to include the military, because he could see that the peace officers were being militarized, and he could see the trend to bring the military forces onto state land, onto the private sector, into the private sector. And so that's why he decided to merge the two of them. Started out with the National Guard, and then the total military personnel. And so that's why this is called a police action for military, and I mean excuse me, I got confused there. American police and military action. So he includes both of them. But as far as these communities go here, Clay, we have hundreds of families that have that have moved here. Everybody in this county has, or I should say, they have many, many different types of housing, many different lifestyles. Some are living in mobile homes. Some have very nice houses that they built. It just depended on how much money people had when they came here. But we all have acreage, and most are growing their own gardens, living quite independently. And the neat thing about Idaho County, Idaho, that's the particular county where we live here, is that there are no building codes. For example, if we wanted to get one of those little homes that you folks are producing...
Tiny Texas houses, and you can look at that, folks, online, tinytexashouses.com, or Tiny Texas Houses on Facebook. Go ahead.
I listen to Patriot Talk Radio, and there is an ad on there. It may be your company, Clay, but they sound very, very enticing. And there are many different places popping up around the country, as you know, where people are joining together to live more economically and watch each other's backs. I know down near the Rio Grande there, I believe in southern New Mexico, I believe, there's a group there that has quarter-acre lots, and you can get those for a little over $1,000 and participate in that particular plan. So
yeah, we ship these houses. We ship these houses all over the country. Matter of fact, we shipped about 3 up to Idaho last year.
Did you? Mm-hmm.
And
yeah,
they're just
the dimensions?
Well, they're 12 foot by up to 30 foot. And with 12 foot wide, they can be transported on the highway. The porches fold down, and you know, a semi will be able to take them anywhere that you want them. And we're trying to do more than that. We've got 40 acres here to put these houses on. There's small villages. We're figuring maybe 10 families or 10 houses per acre here, and it's you know, but you don't have to be here. But the thing about them is, it's really a business opportunity for people, because they started this business by going out and salvaging old barns and old houses, because the wood built so many years ago, or made so many years ago, cut down so many years ago, is so much better than the trees they have today. So
that's right.
It's all made, 98% of or 99% of it is made out of salvaged material, and you just can't believe how much the quality of everything from doorknobs to glass has gone downhill.
Oh, I know it. It's built to fail almost, isn't it, these days?
Built-in obsolescence, planned obsolescence, folks. So you've got to replace those windows and those doors in 5 or 10 years.
Oh, yes. Right here on Jack's property, or I should say right next to Jack's property here, is his secretary, Teresa, and her husband. They built a straw bale home, and I'll tell you, that man, he's a mechanical engineer, and I'll tell you, he used so much salvaged lumber. They have the most gorgeous hardwood floors, Clay, and they used lumber that they had gotten from just such sources as you're talking about there to build this home and the straw bale home, and to put in beautiful hardwood floors. So
you should have them contact me, because we want to see these salvage yards, these salvage fairs, these salvaged villages built from salvaged material. We'd like to see those spring up about every 150 miles. And feature everything made in America, and everything, right down to the vegetables that you can grow in your gardens. And they're going after gardens. Now, what I've said, Carol, is that anytime a communist regime takes over, and this is exactly what Jack's been talking about even longer than me, is that they go after the farmers first, they go over to the intelligentsia next, that's anyone smart enough to know what they're trying to pull, and third, they go after the veterans and the police officers that are loyal to the old regime. And I've told people for years.
That's right.
I've told people for years, man, there was no expiration date on that oath I took when I was 17 years old.
Amen. Listen, Clay, there's a friend who has supported Jack's work for many years, and he said Jack McLamb was the original oath keeper before the organization Oath Keepers ever came to be.
Yes, he was.
This is what impressed me with Jack. You know what, if I could just say this about myself. Growing up, and until I was in my 30s, late 30s, and somebody gave me those spotlight newspapers to read, I was the least likely political activist. I mean, I knew nothing, Clay. I just went along. Hey, I obeyed the law, and I went along, and I knew I had a president over there in Washington, D.C., and I knew I had a governor, and he did his job, and I knew I had a congressman, and he or she did her job, his job. I didn't know. Nobody ever told me that we, as the people of this republic, were supposed to be monitoring our officials, from the dog catcher all the way up to the president. I didn't know that, but when American Free Press or the Spotlight woke me up, I began to watch, and I was appalled, even way back 30 years ago now, about 32 years since I woke up, or started to wake up. I was appalled at how much that our officials do and sanction is unconstitutional. It's unlawful. And our poor politically dumbed down people don't even know it. They don't realize it because they were not trained to study the law, that is the Constitution, understand the common law, and watch their officials to make sure that they stayed within the limitations of those privileges that we gave to them. We the people have the power, thanks to our Creator, and we are delegating just certain limited sections of that authority, of our sovereignty, to these officials, and they are bound, or they are supposed to be bound, to stay within the guidelines of the rights, or I should say the powers we gave to them. So it's a big job, isn't it, Clay? It is,
and you brought it up, you brought the point up that I wanted to touch on next. What Jack is doing, and has been doing a couple of years longer than I've been doing it, is probably the most important thing any one of us can do, because it's what, I started this, Carol, after what happened at Waco. So Jack was ahead of me a little bit. I said I can't sit back and watch something like this happen in America.
Good for you.
And this is the way we all need to be, but I said, what could I do? So I went out and started the militia. Now, they've tried to use that to demonize me, but my response is, what part of the Second Amendment don't you understand?
Amen.
I started the militia. Right. I was guilty of that in New Mexico, but guess what? I did it in the governor's office, and that governor is running for president today on the Libertarian Party. Gary Johnson.
Oh, wow.
We have other people out there that are Gary Johnson. And folks, if you got choice between, Zionist A and Muslim B, you don't have a choice in our elections. You don't have a Christian up there that is running for office.
That's right.
Really. And folks, we can do something about this. I mean,
Clay, I'd like to mention.
Go ahead.
Excuse me.
Go ahead, dear.
I'd like to mention one very important section of this Operation Vampire Killer 2012. To me, I think it's worth the price of $15 to get it just for this, besides so much else that's in it. By the way, I want to mention this, Clay, in fairness. Jack McLamb did not write the entire Operation Vampire Killer 2012. He did almost single-handedly, except for the editing. He wrote Operation Vampire Killer 2000 back in 1992. He wrote that himself. But in 2012, Jack had a lot of input from several of his colleagues, and so there's one section in this manual that I'd like to point out right now, and that is thanks to Bernadine Smith of the Second Amendment Committee. Do you know her?
Absolutely.
She's in the Bay Area of California. Anyway, Bernadine submitted a whole lot of information to us a year and a half ago when we were beginning to put this book together. And this one section that I want to point out is this. There is a public law put out in 1961 under the John Kennedy administration, and this is Public Law 87-297, and it explains how it is called the Plan for General and Complete Disarmament of the United States. And it is called, in oxymoron terms, it's called the Peace Plan. Well, Clay, under this plan that was put out in the John Kennedy administration, there's going to be peace in the world. There's going to be peace in the United States of America under the communist boot. There's going to be peace because you won't have any of those weapons that you fought for, Clay. They will take them from you. And let me tell you this, peace officers and soldiers, even you will not have weapons either if this plan for the UN, United Nations plan for the disarmament of America, when that's fully implemented, even the police officers will not be allowed to have a self-defense weapon, nor will the soldiers, unless, and here's the big unless, if you are willing to sell out your nation, sell out your family, your neighbors, if you are willing to go along and enforce this totalitarian system against your brothers and sisters, you will be allowed to have a weapon because you'll be using it under the command of United Nations godless forces. Now, how is that for an opportunity? So the police officer, and this is why, folks, your listeners, I'd like to say this. This is why it is critical for you to take a document like this. It's a couple hundred pages, but there's lots of pictures, lots of charts in here. It's not a difficult read. But it's so important for every one of us to see that our own sheriff gets a copy, our police chief, our next-door neighbor who happens to be a returnee from Afghanistan, a soldier, active or retired. It's important for your county commissioner to have it. It's important for everyone to know that the plan has never been repealed. This Public Law 87-297 is still in force. They just have it hiding in the wings while they beat on people like Clay Douglas when he wants to stand on his God-given Second Amendment guaranteed rights, you see. So every American has the responsibility to do something. And you can take a copy of this manual. $15 is not going to hurt anybody too much. And look through it and point out parts of it to your sheriff. Point out parts of it to your police chief or your soldier friend or whoever else is who cares enough and is awake enough to read something.
Now, do you touch on agenda? Do you touch on Agenda 21 because that's really affecting our farms and ranches, and people aren't even aware of it? It's as bad or worse than the Wildlands project that started years ago.
It is, Clay, and I want to say that you brought up something that is a sore spot, because can you imagine? Even though this book was put out, it was put together about 10 months ago, I guess. For some reason, it did not include Agenda 21 straight on. However, there are parts in here which shows the globalization where the UN plan is to lump nations together into these 10 regions around the globe toward this global totalitarianism. Then it comes into the United States.